Much like the time I took an archery class, my 2024 reading was full of hits and misses. Some bullseyes and some wild mistakes, but both archery and reading left me feeling like an invincible stud. Yeah, that's how finishing a book makes me feel. Anyway, today I'm going through the biggest surprises and the biggest disappointments of my reading year. Let's start with the surprises. This is why I love reading books that no one is talking about, in order to find those hidden gems, those underrated books that have just been waiting for you to discover. Those unexpected 5-star reads are so rare and so amazing. Maybe I've never heard of them, or maybe I just randomly picked them up, or maybe it was a book that was aimed at kids. Whatever the reason for my low or non-existent expectations, by the end of these books that I'm about to talk about, they 100% hooked me. The first book I'll talk about is Dragon's Egg, and I'm pretty sure I heard about this one from another booktuber, though I'm not exactly sure who that was, but throwing this out to the BookTube universe, thank you for all that you do. I added it to my TBR for a while, not really thinking much about it at the time. But man, oh man, this was like a top-notch Star Trek episode where we get to secretly, or not so secretly, witness aliens totally transform from the first page to the last. You get to see these tiny aliens involve in the blink of an eye. It's like playing the old Civilization computer game, if anybody's familiar with that. You get to basically watch history unfold before your eyes in just a matter of hours. And then what makes the book even better is that these aliens interact with humans, even though they're experiencing time at completely different speeds. This was hard sci-fi at its most entertaining. Another one of my favorite discoveries that I made this year was Sunset and Sawdust. And this was a book genre mashup that doesn't really normally appeal to me. It's a gritty Western crime thriller set in Depression-era Texas. So it's incredibly violent at times, but also ridiculously funny at other points. But the descriptive writing is amazing throughout it all. It's kind of like a playful version of Cormac McCarthy's The Road, if that's a thing at all. It's dark, violent, and well written, but there's, unlike Cormac McCarthy's book, there's kind of a light at the end of this tunnel. Also, the dialogue is punchy and the characters' motivations are beautifully hidden from the other characters. So the reader knows the chess match that's being played behind everyone else's backs, and you're rooting for certain characters. This character at first, and then this character. Different characters, you're kind of cheering for them along the way to figure out what everybody else is doing. My third surprise that I came across this year was I Rode a Horse of Milk White Jade. And this year I made myself read some classic YA books that I didn't actually read in my youth. Some of these were kind of nostalgic ones that for other people growing up in the 80s or 90s, maybe even 2000s, would have read and loved. But this one was an award winner that impressed me a lot. It's set in 14th century Mongolia and features a teenage girl named Ayuna. One of her feet was crushed by a horse when she was young, but she refuses to let that, and kind of her reputation as being cursed because of it, hold her back from winning this local horse race that she desperately wants to win. The author's detailed writing about the setting, which is the Mongolian steppes, is breathtaking. You really feel transported back to that time and place. And the story has this kind of Mulan-like switcheroo that creates quite a bit of tension, and in the end you're really just invested in Ayuna as a character. Another book that snuck up and surprised me this year was The Girl Who Drank the Moon. A lot of people are probably familiar with this one, but actually this was a book about parenting and magic that my 8-year-old daughter actually recommended to me. It was so cute and fun, yet really kind of deep by the end. I mean, I got into it, and I couldn't believe by the conclusion of the book how much I enjoyed reading it. Plus, I got to talk to my daughter about it and share this kind of reading experience with her, which is great. It's awesome, and I want to kind of do more of that as she's becoming more literate and able to read kind of higher grade books. And the fifth and final book that surprised me in a good way this year was The Heart in Winter. And this is something that I don't typically read. It's a light Western with a splash of romance. And in it, a married woman runs off with this kind of head in the clouds cowboy just for like a few brief, blissful weeks as they're kind of escaping from their normal lives and they're on the run because a couple of gunmen are hired by the woman's husband or ex-husband, and they're kind of hot on the trail of these star-crossed lovers. There's a unique writing style, cadence, and vocabulary to this one that may take a smidge of getting used to. It's also got lighthearted moments, but blink and you may miss them because a couple of the characters they have a quick wit and they're really fast in the way that they're saying things. In the end, it's a fun Western romp with a poetic feel, making the story seem grander than it should, especially because it's not that long of a book. Now for the disappointments, the books that let me down. I had high expectations for these for one reason or another going into them, but they fell short. That doesn't obviously mean that they're bad books by any measure, but I just felt like they didn't live up to the hype that I'd created for them inside my own head. And the first one I'm going to talk about, which really isn't a disappointment, but it's Assassin's Apprentice. And I gave this book 5 stars. I loved it. I really did. But it's disappointing in that I knew it was going to be a 5-star book. I had built it up in my head as being the greatest book ever written practically, because so many people have talked about it just being amazing. And it was, but because the bar had been set so high for it, I felt like it disappointed me. I was expecting even more from it, even though, like I said, I loved it. And because of that, I don't even know if I'm going to continue this series, which seems kind of silly and weird, but if I know that the book is going to be so amazing and so great, I built it up too much. It's got too much hype. And therefore, when I read it, I'm not going to love it as much as I would have if I had really, barely heard about it or, was coming into it almost blind. Another book that disappointed me a bit this year was Tau Zero. And this was hard sci-fi that went a little too hard for me. It made me realize maybe hard sci-fi isn't 100% a lock for me. It's about a spaceship that loses the ability to decelerate and goes so fast that the time outside of the spaceship is racing past. Millennia are over in an instant. But what happens psychologically to the crew then? I liked the idea of theory, but I didn't really wind up liking the crew enough to care about what was going to happen to them. And the technical mumbo jumbo that's part of it being hard sci-fi really kind of put me off. The third book that disappointed me this year, and probably the most recent release that I have here, is The Life Impossible by Matt Haig. And I have a high bar for Matt Haig. I love a couple of his books. His writing style is great. Usually kind of this magical feeling that he has to his books are amazing. This one didn't quite reach those heights for me. It was fine. It was okay. I think I gave it 4 stars even. But I was disappointed in that you get so amped up for an author you love, their latest release, you read it, and it's just kind of meh, It's it saddens me a little bit. It makes me cry a little bit because I know how good his writing can be, and this one didn't quite get there for me. Up next is a book that a lot of people love, but I just really couldn't get into, and that's Dragonflight. And this classic fantasy book just zoomed by. It went so fast. And one of the problems, though, because I'm okay with a book going by at a quick pace, one of the problems was that it felt like it was written 100 years ago. The language felt ancient, and it didn't really give me enough time because of that fast pace to latch onto the characters or the world. I wound up just kind of wanting to be done with it. By halfway through, I was, I'm over it. This isn't that great, and it didn't have an ending that really drew me back in and satisfied me. And last but not least was Minor Mage. This was a big disappointment to me because I have really started to get into T. Kingfisher. I've been working through her catalog, and this was probably my least favorite T. Kingfisher book I've ever read. I'll have my ultimate T. Kingfisher rankings out at some point, but it was just kind of a blah story that felt middle grade-ish. It felt really YA. Maybe it wasn't aimed at me. Maybe that was part of the problem. It's about a hero, really, whose magical powers aren't strong enough, which I feel like you have to have that, especially if you're going for this kind of save the world type of plot. And in the end, the characters didn't develop enough. The highs and lows weren't high and low enough, I guess, if that makes sense. Everything was just kind of a little bit along the baseline and didn't jump up or jump down too much. What books were surprisingly good or just plain disappointing for you this year? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more novel advice. Happy reading!